Is Japanese university worth it? Retrospect. Hi, it's been about 4 months now since I got my diploma from the Yokohama City University. So I figured this is the right time to retrospect my 4 years and try to answer the question, is Japanese university worth it? The more I started to think about this question, the more complicated and abstract it started to feel. There are so many angles to take into consideration. It is likely that I can still find the final conclusion to this dilemma, but I will do my best to analyze it from statistical approach as well as from my own experiences. I will also make a more in-detail introduction of my university to answer some of the questions that you guys have been asking me in the comments. Without further rambling, let's get into the topic. First, to answer if it was worth it to apply into Japanese university, we need to contemplate on what are the measurements of worth. To make things simple, I divided these into 2 categories: benefits and costs. I guess you could think of it as a balance sheet of sorts. Hashtag just business major things. So let's first start by considering the benefits of what you might expect from going into university in Japan. Also, these are not only exclusive for Japan or university per se. These same measurements could be used for the question, is Portuguese medical school worth it? You get the idea. Alright, let's start with the things that I would consider as benefits that are possible to get from going to a university in Japan. I will start by relating to my own personal experiences and then later show some statistics to give you the bigger picture. So the first benefit to consider is the free time you get. Japanese universities are somewhat different from other universities in that it is much more difficult to get accepted than it is to graduate. Passing the entrance exams and interviews is generally considered the hard part. Once you're in, you're pretty much guaranteed to graduate. As long as you make the course registrations on time, don't skip too many classes, and put at least minimal effort to studying the final exam of each course, you're going to graduate. This means that Japanese university students usually have a lot of spare time for extracurricular activities. Most spend their spare time doing club activities, which the university offers plenty of. There are all the typical sports ranging from basketball to soccer, as well as some sports that are unique to Japan, such as Kyudo, karate, and others. For culture-oriented students, there are all kinds of music clubs, art clubs, a video game club, and even a Lego building club. I talked about these clubs in my video about the 10 best things about Japanese university. So if you want more details, you can go check out that video. In addition to these club activities, many university students spend their time working arubaito, which means working part-time. Arubaito is a good way to get some extra income, and for some, it is an essential income source, as university students are usually not flush with cash. Lately, however, there have been some disruptions due to the COVID-19, as many shops have had to close down or reduce their workforce. This means that university students that rely on this income to pay for their tuition, rent or other expenses can't make ends meet. Luckily, the situation has improved compared to a month or 2 ago, and should continue to improve given that we don't face a second wave. I think that club activities and arubaito are the main extracurricular activities, but in addition many choose to do volunteer work, do stuff with their friends, or pursue a hobby outside of their university. Usually when people think of Japan, having a lot of free time isn't what first pops into their mind, but when it comes to university students, they certainly do. During my 4 university years, I really appreciated this freedom. I joined the Taekwondo club, did some arubaito here and there, started this YouTube channel, and had a really good time overall. Some people go as far as to describe these 4 years as the summer vacation of your life. So that is the first benefit in our benefit account. The next benefit is social networking. By social networking, I mean all the human relations that you will create during these 4 years. These can be friends you make during the university courses or extracurricular activities, It could be a girlfriend or a boyfriend, academical relations, or contacts in the business world that can help you with your future career. It all depends on your personality and willingness to make these relations. Speaking from my experiences, I made a few good friends and a ton of acquaintances. You know, the likes that you greet when you see them at the campus, but they never really hang out together or anything.
Hello there.
There's even a word in Japanese to describe these relations, which is yotomo. This comes from the word you use to greet, yo, and tomo, which means a friend. The fact that I was a foreigner in a university where the majority were Japanese might have contributed to this enormous amount of yotomos that I had. I also met my current girlfriend in my taekwondo club, and we have been together over 2 years now. For potential business relations, my seminar was really well positioned. We had many opportunities to meet with people from local businesses, as well as take part in international conferences to make presentations and talk with all kinds of hotshots. The third benefit in our accounting book is knowledge. In this context, I mainly mean the knowledge from attending university courses and all that comes with it. Of course, you can include the studying that you can do on your free time, but we already talked about that category. So this will include only knowledge gained from university sources. I will first provide you with the background of my studies. The department that I applied to was called Kokusai Souko Kagagobu, which would be translated to something like the Department of International Sciences, and my major was business. This name is pretty much just to make it sound cool and relevant. The way my studying program worked was that the first year was dedicated to common knowledge and introduction. This was the same for all students, even for students in other departments, meaning that the first year was pretty much the only year when I met with students from the medical department or educational department, for example. I was also mandated to take this class called Nihon Jijo, which translates to something like Japan things. This course was mandatory for all foreign students, and after taking both the Nihon Jijo 1 and Nihon Jijo 2, I can say that I didn't really learn anything relevant about Japan that I didn't already know. So the first year was pretty much introductory classes, doing ice-breaking sessions, and joining club activities. The second year was when we could choose to specialize in our majors and start taking more comprehensive courses. Because my major was business, I could choose accounting, economics, or business administration. This selection is done by joining a seminar, which is kind of like your home class, with each yearly pack of students averaging around 10 students. I was approached by a professor of a business administration seminar, asking me if I wanted to join her seminar on the condition that I had to make a presentation in an international conference. During this time, I wanted to join a business administration seminar, so I took up on the offer and joined this seminar. Being a second-year student, my courses were now more business administration oriented. The way we choose our courses is by referring to our university guidebook to see what type of courses we need to have in order to graduate. I didn't like this system as it only gives you the illusion that you can choose your courses. There isn't much free choice as you need to fill your timetable with the courses that are essential to graduation. The courses themselves were varied, but honestly, academically interesting courses were quite rare to me. To consider a course interesting was a combination of the professor, the contents of the course, and the method of teaching. Many professors would just have these hour-and-a-half long monologues with a monotone voice that would result in half of the class sleeping, playing on their phones, or just daydreaming. Then there were the proponents of active learning that would always make students do group projects, which was sometimes great and other times torture. Overall, I have to be honest and say, taking all these courses, I didn't learn as much as I expected to. The contents of these courses were mostly very introductory and didn't go very deep. Our economic classes, for example, consisted only on learning the same old Keynesian equations without really understanding how to use them or to question them at all. There was not a single mention of central banks in all of the economic courses that I took. I could ramble on and on about the boring courses I had to endure, but you get the idea. Of course, in the mix, there were a few courses that had a really motivated teacher that captivated the attention of the class and stimulated my intellectual thirst. The biggest learning process for many is the final thesis that we had to write on a topic that was related to our majors. I was already more interested in economics and decided to write on universal basic income, but this topic was rejected by my professor as it was more economic-oriented than business-oriented. So I changed my topic to microtransactions in games and the methods that the publishers use to sell these. Researching and writing about this topic was interesting, but the final presentation and attention from my supervisor professor was somewhat underwhelming. I think that this knowledge benefit is different for each person, depending on their university, personality, professors, and so on. But this is how I felt about money. The fourth category in the benefits is the career category. A big reason why many choose to apply to university is the improved career prospects. In Japan, people with a university degree tend to earn more than those without. And some positions outright require a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree just to apply. Personally, this category is hard to judge as I still haven't started to work for a company here in Japan. This is mainly a personal choice as I'm still unsure if I want to work for a company here or not. Maybe I will make a video about this topic sometime in the future. Anyway, you can see from my university statistics that the employment rate is somewhere around 99%, meaning that you're pretty much guaranteed to get a job after graduating. Most of my friends have already started to work for different companies, so I believe this 99% is close to the truth. You can also see here what kind of companies students are being employed at. The latest data is from the year 2018. It will be interesting to see how the coronavirus situation will affect the employment prospects for this year graduates and onward. One thing I would like to mention is that even if a student had a business administration as their major, it doesn't really mean that they are automatically put into a managerial position. On the contrary, it is common that the first years in company are spent learning the ropes and doing some menial tasks that the higher-ups don't feel like doing themselves. But talking about Japanese work life requires another video in itself, so this is as far as I will get into the topic. The last benefit that I will add into the list is the benefit of staying in Japan. As a foreigner, you are required to have a visa in Japan. If you are visiting Japan, you are usually granted a 3-month visa stay. But should you want to live here for a longer term, you have to have a reason that the immigration bureau will accept. Working for a Japanese company, marrying a Japanese national, or studying in a Japanese university are some methods that will get you this visa, which allows you to live here a longer term. One of my original goals was to live in Japan for a longer term, so applying to a university here was a good choice in that aspect. It gave me the permission to live here these 4 years, and an opportunity to extend my stay. These are the benefits that felt worth mentioning to me. If you can think of anything else, let me know in the comment section. However, as with most things in life, applying to university here in Japan also has many costs. Let's start with the most obvious one, that is the cost it takes to apply to Japanese university. I made a whole video about this process, so I would just recommend watching it for a detailed explanation what it can mean to apply to a Japanese university. But to make a long story short, I had to fly to Japan many times to do all kinds of exams and interviews. The university application process was also full of bureaucracy that was quite unfriendly to foreigners. It was also really expensive to bounce back and forth between Finland and Japan. This applying process might be easier these days, depending on the university and where you apply from. The second big cost for attending a university in Japan is the tuition. In my university, I had to first pay an initial enrollment fee of around $2,500. After After this, the yearly tuition was around $5,000. This can be cheap or expensive depending on where you compare. But for me, this was $5,000 more expensive compared to if I had studied in a Finnish university. Luckily, I didn't have to spend that much on textbooks, as I estimate that I only spent around $100 for all the university textbooks I needed in the 4 years. Most courses didn't use a textbook, and instead the professor would distribute printed papers to students. The courses that required a textbook were usually resolved by finding a senpai willing to part with their old textbook. When I had no other choice than to buy a textbook, I could purchase one from our university shop for around 10 or 20 bucks. Some courses required us to use a computer, and for students that didn't have one, they could always use the university computer class for free. Other than tuition, there are the usual rent, insurance fees, and everything else. But I would have to pay these in Finland anyway, so I will leave these out. The third cost is a more of a mental cost, which is the effort you have to make in order to graduate. As I said earlier in the free time category, Japanese universities are not as difficult to graduate from as many other countries. This said, there is still a bar that you have to meet in order to graduate. And as a foreigner, this can require much more effort as you are living in a foreign culture and language environment. Understanding some mechanics of the university, like the course enrollment system, and taking courses in Japanese that are riddled with business-specific lingo, was really tiring during my freshman year. I also had to manage with things like finding a landlord that was willing to rent to foreigners, and other everyday tasks that I wouldn't consider a challenge if I were to do them in Finland. One reason for my survival was the experience of having done an exchange year in Japan during my high school. During this high school exchange year, I learned the basics of the language and the culture. I'm not saying that you can't apply to a Japanese university if you have no experience in Japan before. Starting from university with no experience is definitely doable. Just be prepared to be somewhat mentally fatigued from the first year. Learning Japanese is always a good idea if you want to study here full-time. If you are interested in only doing a half-year or 1-year exchange, then learning the language is not really mandatory. I knew many people that came to my university from different countries for half a year or 1-year exchange. They mostly took courses in English, enjoyed the country, and then returned to continue their studies in their home country universities. The last category for costs is somewhat abstract. It is something called opportunity cost, meaning that if I had not gone to a Japanese university and did something else, what could I have gained from that? There is really nothing to say, as you can always think about what could have been, but I still think it is worth thinking about this before you decide to apply to a university. Lately, the whole notion of a university degree is being called into question as whether students are really getting their money's worth. This is a really complicated question involving economical and philosophical aspects, so I will not go into more detail in this video. So we have now considered the benefits and costs of applying to a Japanese university. But we have still to answer the question, is it worth it? And my answer is this: I don't know. I can only answer this question in my own personal case for each of the categories that I listed, but to give a definitive answer would be to oversimplify. I still hope that this video gave you some measurement tools to think about if applying to university in Japan or other countries is something you want to do. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.